so we'll get going today. Welcome today. Welcome to the DPO Council meeting. I'm Amber Forster. I'm the DPO chair and the CFO/DPO for Oregon Youth Authority. Normally we have Josh that kind of helps me with this meeting, but he might be on via phone, but I believe he's driving, and so he won't be attending on camera today, but he's going to be listening in if he can. And I'm sure if you have any questions for him or whatever, let us know and we'll capture him in the chat and he can answer those for us down the line. Oh, yay. Thanks everybody for popping on camera. I appreciate that. That's cool. Okay, so first item of business that we're going to talk about today, and everybody I hope got the agenda. Is everybody on the email list? So you got like the agenda before the meeting. If you didn't, for some reason, you didn't receive it, that always comes out usually the week of the meeting, maybe the week before sometimes, depending on how many changes we have. If you didn't get it, if you drop your name in the chat, we just want to make sure everybody's getting the notifications and emails. We do use that listserv a lot to get notifications out. So just want to make sure everybody's got it. First thing we want to talk about really quick was Executive Order 2215. So I'm sure as many of you saw on October 3rd, Executive Order 2215 was signed and dropped and sent out or made public. And so this is regarding procurement and DEI procurement. Oh, Kale, Daniel, you didn't get the agenda. Okay, thank you. We'll make sure to add you to the list. Are you the DPO for OEM? Kale. You are not. Okay, are you representing as DPO today? Oh, I'm seeing the agendas. I'm DPO. Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Can you drop your DPO's name in the chat, Kale? Because that would be the one that we'd send them to, and then they could forward that to you. So they would be the ones on the list, whoever your DPO is for OEM. Perfect. Thank you. We'll make sure he's on the list. But thank you for joining today to represent him. Okay. Let's see. So Executive Order 20. So very much around DEI and procurement. Kelly has put together, is putting together in sort of looking at the executive order, and there's several things that need to happen in a relatively short amount of time for the executive order and things to be put in place. One of them being a work group, a procurement procurement work group around this that will include getting results from the disparity study that's coming out, but among many other things. There's also a 5-year plan that needs to be put in place by DAS and ODOT and Business Oregon by October 1st. And so a work group's been put together. He's reached out to a handful of agencies that are kind of directly related to that, and then we'll be sharing that as we kind of go through that and sharing updates on what happens within the work group. Kelly, did you want to say anything else on that to start?
Just a little bit. I think you covered it pretty well. So earlier this month, Governor Brown signed Executive Order 2215, which has all to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion in public procurement. There are multiple areas related to the work we do that are touched by the executive order, but there are some immediate tasks that need to happen in order for us to develop a plan and a process to do the rest of the work in the executive order. Those two immediate tasks are just briefly as follows. First, DAS is tasked with developing a 5-year action plan. The EO asks us to collaborate, directs us to collaborate with other state agencies in developing that plan. And that plan is intended to implement several significant sections of the EO. DAS is to have that plan developed and ready to be reviewed by the governor's policy advisor by October 1st. So fairly short, well, actually really short time frame for developing a 5-year plan. So I have reached out to a cross-section of agencies asking for folks to join us and acting as sort of a subject matter group for us to bounce our draft plans against and get input on. So the agencies we reached out to first are ODOT and Business Oregon, partially because the EO specifically requires those two agencies to develop their own plans, and we want to work with them and have their input so the DAS plan and the Business Oregon and the ODOT plans are as cohesive as they can be. So all of us are trying to do the same work. In addition, Treasury will be serving on that group as an agency who won't be required to follow the DAS plan, but may opt to. So we wanted to get input from those group of agencies. Also, Oregon Youth Authority. So Amber and Josh, as the vice chair, will provide input, trying to represent the broader DPO group. In addition, I see Mr. Chris Wilson here. He and some of his team from the disparity study will be helping us in this work. We also have, I think I have one. If I ask you to volunteer, you know who you are. Oh, DHS also will. Kirk Rhodes has volunteered to provide some input from that very large agency. I wish I could get input from all of you at the outset of developing this plan, but this very short time frame isn't going to allow that level of input on the front end. But once we get the plan as far along as we can to meet the requirements of the EO, I will be coming back to all of you as the DPO Council to give us input on clarifying the plan, to help us develop the tools and training and other pieces that the plan will speak to that the EO requires. So my message is, if I didn't call you or email you in the last week to help with this, fear not, you will have plenty of opportunity to help us as we build out this plan, and more importantly, as we put the plan into effect to begin to implement what the EO is striving at. The second piece of the EO that also needs to be completed by October 1st. This piece directs DAS to lead a procurement equity work group. This work group, in addition to the agency representatives I've mentioned already, will include members of the community. We have been engaged for over a year now with the Governor's Racial Justice and Equity Council, and so we'll be reaching out to some of those members, those community organizations, to help us build out this work group. This work group is primarily tasked with helping advise Chris on how to implement recommendations from the disparity study. Not to pick on Chris, because it'll be how all of us are to implement recommendations from the disparity study. But we're going to try to tap into a little bit of that community output sooner than when we have the disparity study results, so we can get some community feedback on this plan that we're trying to put together. So a lot of pieces we're trying to put together. So my summary would be, we're working on putting together the 5-year action plan. Once we have that, we'll bring it back to the DPO group for input and advice on how to implement it and make it clear. We're putting together the procurement equity work group to help advise and give input on our plan, as well as get them up to speed and ready to advise on implementing the results from the disparity study. There's a lot more on the EO, but we're going to focus on these first two pieces. I guess my only other message would be, nothing changes today in how we do our work, but there are changes to come, and we'll work through that and develop that together over the next few months. Happy to take questions, and I'll do my best to answer them as I can.
Shannon has one. She dropped in the chat. Shannon Rand. She says,
I don't take questions from Shannon Rand. No, go ahead.
She said, I've not had a chance to review the EOs, so I felt okay. So what is the plan to contain? And then she said, I guess one thing I have a question about essentially is how or where will the reporting issues be addressed that we have had for many years in the past?
Okay, so the EO is, I think, about a dozen pages, so I won't go through it in detail. We'll make sure you get it all, but I guess on a broad level, and I'll ask Chris to steer me if I get too far off. It talks about outreach. How are we agencies to develop and implement proactive outreach to the communities in terms of public contracting opportunities? It talks about putting language in solicitation documents to describe the state's commitment to diversity, equity, and procurement. It talks about requirements for training. It talks about adding an equity lens to our evaluation teams, for example, and solicitation. So it gets into the nuts and bolts of how we do some of our work. In terms of reporting, the reporting is very different from what we have been asked to do in the past as it relates to COVID, for example. So this really will be looking at DAS, to work with agencies to pull together reporting on how we're doing, and we need to define what how we're doing means. The plan envisions a procurement equity website where we will have data dashboards and reporting out how we're doing. So lots of pieces to unpack, Shannon. So that's a high level 10-cent introduction, and we will come back and try to walk through it in more detail. Chris, you want to add anything to my budget presentation on that?
I think that was more than 10 cents. That was more like 12 cents. So I think it was very impressive. No, I wouldn't add. I think that's the high level thing. I think that some of the very specific things will be fleshed out through the 5-year plan and some of the other conversations that we'll be having. And just that I believe that this particular plan of action is a little bit separate from the disparity study, even though we'll implement many of the disparity study recommendations through this action, but it is different, not directly tied to the study itself.
That I would agree with that. Two distinct efforts.
And this is Shannon. I totally agree with that as well, which is part of my concern in that, you know, if we have this group being put together and we're not looking at some of the major crux of our issues in the past, we can't address those. For example, what is the ultimate goal for COVID? Is it all spend with any organization that's certified, or is it only spend over 150,000? And the reason I bring these things up is that, you know, we have our own authority at the Department of Forestry that doesn't even require us to follow DAS rule for postings. So we follow DOJ rules, although we're getting more, hopefully, because we need to track this stuff central and not using authority differences. But I have in the past had to go through multiple reports that were 6,000 lines long to determine what vendors are certified and what vendors we've used, because we could have used them under some authority that wasn't accounted for in the reports being sent out from DAS based on ORPN. And so my point here is that I just want to make sure that we're clear on what the goal is going forward, because I don't want to be feeling like I'm in a situation again where I'm justifying my existence and how really we are meeting our goals and working through these things. So just a thought.
So I would offer 2 or 3 things briefly to that, Shannon, and I understand and I get your points, but I think the first thing I would say is we have distinctly separate things happening here. We still have the DAS statewide policy related to COVID. That's still in force and effect. That's not rescinded by this new EO. So everything in that policy, and I don't have the policy number in front of me as it reports to the things that we must do specific to COVID, that all remains in place. That isn't changed. That isn't altered by the governor's EO. Now, we may have to come back around and do some amendments to that policy, but that's still in place. The EO is much less about reporting, though there is some reporting, and it's much broader than COBID certified firms. The EO is speaking to diversity, equity, and inclusion in public procurement across the board, irrespective if firms are certified or not, irrespective if the ownership of the firm is in any particular category or covered by any particular program. So it's much broader in that scope. And then thirdly, the disparity study is a distinctly separate and needs to be a distinctly separate process which will give us the legal foundation to make changes to address past disparities. The trick is going to be, and I think this is maybe where you were hinting, how do we weave all three of those together into sort of a cohesive approach? The answer is we don't know yet. We won't have the disparity study results for a year.
I just want to make sure that we are able, like you said, Kelly, to bring all those pieces together and ensure that, okay, so at some point, the executive order mentions that someone is going to review or evaluate how we're doing. Well, how is that going to happen? And so I just want to make sure that the folks that may have, and not that I'm saying I need to be involved, because I'm happy to give input, but life is busy. But in your 5-year action plan, if that's part of it, is how are we going to actually interpret the information, and what is the ultimate goal from the governor's office? I think we're going to struggle with having an accurate 5-year plan that agencies can understand what ultimately we're trying to get at. Because for me right now, it's like, sure, we encourage it. We do everything we can. I'm just waiting for the day that the foot drops and tells me I have to report on what I've done for COVID lately. And I've tried, but how do I track that? So my point is, going forward, I just want to make sure we set ourselves up for success.
Shannon, I certainly agree with setting ourselves up for success. Without being political at all, I suspect the direction and expectations from the governor's office might shift in January. In terms of how they shift, I don't know. So as we meet this October deadline to put a plan in place, the plan is going to have to be a living document, and it is going to have to be able to add, subtract, and change its content. And I wish I could be more holistic in my description, but that's, I think, about as best I can describe it at the moment. But I certainly understand your concern. I share it.
I just wanted to bring things up because it does take a village to have ideas on issues that might need to be addressed. And so wherever that might fall in that conversation, I just wanted to bring it up in case there's an opportunity for additional input. So thank you.
And there will be plenty more opportunities. So I appreciate that. Other questions, thoughts?
We have one from Maria. At first blush, would organ bias capture the data requirement in EO 2215, or are you thinking it will be another system?
So organ bias will capture spend data. It can give us reporting in terms of contracts to certified firms. We are in process of updating organ buys to allow vendors the opportunity to voluntarily provide demographic data. So whether that's race, gender, ethnicity, those types of things. So to the degree that we need spend reporting about types of contracts and contract size, we'll get there, but we have to really wait until all 3 waves of organ buys are fully implemented, and we have time to begin accruing actual spend. But we had the same level of data that we've had in ORPN before, plus in terms of the demographic data. Those changes will be going into production shortly. The COVID reporting. But I would say in the next year to 18 months, everything we need to know, we may not be able to rely on Oregon bias to tell us. And so we do have a policy, DAS being the we, have a policy option package we're taking forward to the legislature to provide some additional positions to help us implement the EO statewide. And that policy option package envisions the possibility of additional software tools. We don't know if we'll need them, but we wanted the budget authority in case we do. It envisions the ability to hire experts around DEI to come in and help all of us learn and inform us on our processes. And so as we develop the 5-year action plan, and when we get a first draft and you begin to see it, you'll see that we're really going to be talking about what we can do with existing resources, what we can do with additional resources, and trying to set a realistic expectation of what the collective we will be able to do. So I hope that answers the question.
I think that is really helpful. I love to hear that you guys are implementing something in Oregon Buys that can capture, because I think we do have vendors that for whatever reason just aren't comfortable registering to become a COVID vendor. And so I think it's important that we're still capturing that data.
It'll be voluntary because there are vendors that have nervousness about sharing that information, because information can be used for good and it can be used for not good purposes. So but I think Chris and his team are hoping that we get some good response to that opportunity.
Awesome. We have one here from Sharon. Kelly, will data be collected from a future point forward, or will there be expectations to capture some past period? If past, what can agencies do now to gather data that may be needed?
So I don't know fully. But I think once Chris and I figure that out, we will come back, and his data team will come back and help us understand the data that we need and how to capture it. We're going to try to be as forward-looking as we can, but I know that his disparity study work is also backwards-looking, understanding what we've done in the past. But I think my read of the EO would be, it envisions that we capture data to tell the story of how well we're doing implementing the provisions of the EO. And in my mind, that is forward-looking data. But Chris, I don't know if you would agree with that or not. You're more of a data fellow than I am.
I don't know about that. So the disparity study will create a metric benchmark, I believe, that we can measure forward with. I think that the executive order and the work that we're trying to do with the executive order does look forward. I think we're only going to be looking backward at the data from 2017 to 2021, and that's for the disparity study specifically. And in future meetings, I'll be very specific with the data we're going to need from the agencies for the disparity study. But moving on, we are working concurrently on ways to keep metricing and measuring our progress and looking at what we're going to be doing next. So I think that's all part of the plan. And I think to Shannon's point, that's, I think, why my team with the disparity study and looking at this other section of work through the executive order, we're trying to match it as much as possible. We're thinking strategically through the process of implementing the work that we keep seeing and looking at, and all the various recommendations we already know of, but we want to make sure we have those concrete measurements in place and that case law from the disparity study in place to really move the needle on this. Because I think, like we all know, we've been doing this stuff for a long, long time, but we haven't really been able to create the equity that we expect from our actions. So that's why I'll leave that.
Do we have any other questions before we move forward? And if did I miss any in the chat? I don't think I did, but just in case, please feel free to speak up if I did.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. My last comment real quick would be that we will be talking about this probably at every DPO meeting for some time to come. So there will be plenty of opportunities to provide input. We'll make sure you all get a copy of the EO, make sure we get that out to folks. I will be back, and the team that we're coming together will be back to talk about the plan development, and we'll be looking for input from all of you. Probably not until after we implement or put in place the first draft of the plan because of the time frame, but as I said, the plan will be adaptable over time. So there'll be plenty of work for all of your expertise to help with, and I'm going to depend on that. So thank you.
Awesome, thanks. And it looks like Kim already sent an email to the DPO email group with the forwarding that email that came out on the 3rd. And then it looks like also she dropped it in the chat. So both of those avenues are out there if you want to grab it and save that copy for your reference.
I have no idea how she knew I was going to ask her to do that. So thank you, Kim.
Right. Okay, next it looks like we have, if we're good, we're actually doing pretty okay on time here. We're doing well. Looks like we have an organ buys update. Nicole, are you here? Awesome.
I am. Hi there. So
Hi.
hopefully everybody can see the screen okay. So just a quick update for folks today, the things that we want to cover. We want to give a status update on where we are with the project and then share the list of the agencies that are slated for Wave 2. We also want to touch on our Get Ready Forum, which is coming up in September, and share an update on the advanced search bug that we talked about when we met last time, and then have some time for questions and answers. So with that, I will hand it to Carter Stein for our status update.
Thank you, Nicole. Good afternoon, everybody. Just 6 bullets for our brief status update today. The good news was that our Wave 1 agencies, we have 23 Wave 1 agencies, went live on October 1st, so they all have access to the end-to-end e-procurement processes that are available in Organ Buys now. We have some usage statistics. They're a week old now, but it's showing numbers of open market release requisitions, purchase orders, and invoices. Invoices are not at the level of the other 2 document types. Just because we're asking agencies to use Organ Buys going forward. So any in-process requisitions or purchase orders are not going to be put into the system. We're going to start there. So invoices will catch up over time. Also, we have been hosting post-go-live support office hours every day for 2 hours a day. I looked at the log today, and of the 25 issues that are out there, half of them have been closed out. We're also working with other agencies as requested to help them through Organ Buys growth processes. The work that we're working on as a joint project team right now is finalizing our Wave 2 schedule. So we should have that completed by the end of this week, early next week. And then we are working with our agencies in prioritizing change requests, things that we need to do to the system in order to make it work for all of us. So we had a work session with our advisory council yesterday, and they began working on some of that yesterday. And as just discussed, there is demographic data that's being added to Organ Buys that vendors can enter when they do when they sign up for their registration. So that's not in there yet, but it's going to be in there quite shortly. So I'm going to stop there and see if we have any questions from the group. I see a question from Shannon in the chat. might be better offline, but how do you find all the contracts awarded to a vendor, no matter what the agency, like we did in Orphan? I can search a vendor, but can't figure out how to find the associated contracts. Is it something that could be addressed in a drop-in session? Nicole, can you help with that one?
Sure can. So Shannon, it could be addressed in a drop-in session, although I could speak to that now, and I'm sort of foreshadowing one of the future topics here, but using the advanced search. So if you're not logged into the system and while you're on that landing page for Oregon Buys, if you use the advanced search, you can search by vendor there, I believe, and it should bring back any of the contracts, any of the blankets that are assigned to an associated vendor that you choose. So that piece, I think, will give you what you're looking for, and I see a thumbs up there. So give that a try, and then if that doesn't give you what you're looking for, you can absolutely go into one of those drop-in sessions or just contact us, and we can help further. Any other questions for Carter? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Carter. We will move on to our next slide here. So this is just a list of our proposed groupings for our agencies in Wave 2. So we do have a few, folks may remember we had reached out and gathered information from agencies so that we could help kind of categorize based off of like the number of FTE and the number of procurements that are being done at the agencies and that sort of thing. So what we've done when we look at our proposed groupings, at the top here, there are 3 of the large agencies that have been categorized as large that will continue to meet with individually. So Department of Transportation and DHS OHA actually span all 3 waves. Department of Transportation we're working with to set up their interface to their financial system, to Teams. So that work continues. They rolled on some functionality with the first wave, and then that work continues into the second wave. DHS OHA rolled went live with some programs in Wave 1, and then again, that work will continue in Wave 2. And then we will start work with Oregon Military Department as a part of Wave 2. Then we move into our medium agencies. We will be working with those in 2 groups. And so those groups are outlined here. And then we move into the agencies that have been categorized as small, just again, based off of those FTE and procurement numbers and those things. We have a lot more small agencies this wave than we did last wave. So we're dividing those into 2 separate groups. So we'll meet with those groups and work with their core teams in that manner. I see a question here. Could you please record and post the Wave 2 kickoff session? So I think you're referring to what we're going to talk about on our next slide. So Jen, let me know if I'm not correct. But before we address that question, let me just pause and see if we have any questions on the Wave 2 agencies. Okay. I'm not seeing any, so I think, Jen, what you're asking about is we have a Get Ready Forum coming up. So this is set for September 7th from 1 to 2. It's actually open to all state employees that want to learn about the project regardless of the wave status. So if you are a Wave 2 project coordinator, of course, we highly encourage those folks to attend. But if it's somebody in Wave 3 that would like to just attend and learn about the project, you're more than welcome to. For our folks that attend, you'll get a project overview. You will learn about who should be involved from your agency, and then hear about what's coming up next and what the upcoming steps are. So we've got a link here. I'll make sure that Kim gets a copy of this slide deck so that she can send this out. But if folks do want to register to attend, I think we've already got over 100 people signed up, so there's a lot of interest. And I see a thumbs up from Jen, so I do think this is probably what you were referring to, and we will work on getting that recorded for you. Questions on this forum? Perfect. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to cover, at the last DPO meeting, we talked about a bug that we were experiencing when we were using that advanced search if you were not logged into the system. And the workaround was that you had to click the button to include expired contracts, and that has been corrected. It was determined that what was getting us was the contracts that were put into the system with a 9999 as the year expiration date. So that has been corrected, and we are now we have a fully functioning advanced search again for those folks that are not logged in. So Shannon, back to your question earlier, if you go to use this advanced search, this will now work correctly. And here, kind of in between the X and the E in this screenshot, you can see there is a spot to do a search by vendor name. So I think that will give you what you were looking for. Okay. Lastly, we just want to pause for a second and see if there are questions. Before we do, I did want to mention I am going to be scheduling that work group for the agencies that said that they potentially had a need for being able to mark something with a confidential vendor in the system. So the last meeting we talked about that, and I had State Police, Oregon Medical Board, and State Fire Marshal's Office reach out and say that they would like to participate. If there are any other agencies that want to participate in that work group, please add that agency into the chat. I'd like to get that scheduled for probably mid-September. So let me know if you would like to participate. And then other than that, we can open it up for questions. So I see one from Amber. On the homepage, they used to have a DAS link to a spreadsheet with all the price agreements. It was very helpful. So we do have the ability for folks to pull the statewide price agreement list if they are logged into the system. I don't think that's something right now that is posted on the external site. And the other question to that piece is whether or not a price agreement is mandatory or for convenience. So we do have that flagged now on the individual statewide master blanket purchase orders. I was working with Jennifer at DHS yesterday, and what I think is causing a little bit of confusion is that mandatory yes, no column doesn't display if you're looking at it not logged into the system. But if you are logged into the system and you pull up one of those master blanket purchase orders, you can see the custom column that will show mandatory yes, no. So it is there. We're also working to get it added to that statewide price agreement report so that it would show up on the report that folks can pull out.
The other piece on that one.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. The G2B document type, the ones that are intended for punch outs, those do not currently have that flag. And that is another piece that we're working through.
Okay, thanks, Erin. So, and then I see a question from Shannon. And Shannon, I'm not sure if your question is for me or back to Kelly. Where do we go to see what's in the DAS book of business for the next year or two?
And yeah, it could be for whomever, just based on the conversation we were just having about, the website where we could see where the price agreements were. I felt like, it kind of goes along with it with current price agreements, future price agreements. And then you'd mentioned the mandatory versus convenience, which recently we've had more input on how that's going to change. And so that's where I was kind of going. I'm not sure who can answer it, if anyone.
I'll take a quick stab. So I don't have a spot where you can go and get a list of new price agreements or price agreements that we're working on. But I would be happy to have the team put together some information about what we're looking at maybe in the next year and a half, and come back and give a reporting out to the Dpo Council, if that would be helpful. Probably maybe we can do that at the October meeting. If I don't give them at least that much time, I'll be in trouble.
That'd be great. And I understand for how all this works. We all try to project what's coming in the future, but we did have recently a fairly lengthy conversation related to mandatory versus convenience on some stuff that I don't know that was intended to be the way it was. Luckily, we have our own authority, so it's fine. But I just want to make sure in the future, if we weren't to have our own authority on something, that I'd have the ability to provide input before we made a, NASPO participating addendum or a price agreement mandatory that might really affect my agency.
Okay, we can talk more about that, Shannon. I'd be interested, maybe you and I can find a little bit of time to chat offline so I can learn a little bit more about what you're thinking. But happy to have that conversation.
Kelly, it looks like Sharon. Sorry, Shannon. It looks like Sharon at State Police is also kind of wondering the same thing. So this might be a future topic to talk about on price agreements. If DAS intends for them to be mandatory, and if so, how is it determined if a price agreement is mandatory?
We can come back and talk about that, sure.
Great. And then Sharon, yes, we are working, like I said, we do have that that statewide price agreement report that folks can pull. And when I'm done here presenting, I will go grab the link to the instructions again and drop that in the chat in case folks want to review that, how you can pull that list. That's available to the users that are logged into the system. They can pull it. It does not currently, I believe, have a column yet for the mandatory yes, no, but we are working on getting that added. We just need to have something expanded a little bit on the BI tool before we can put that in. So we're working on getting that done. And yep, I'll drop the instructions in the chat here shortly. Any other questions on Oregon buys? Okay, with that, thank you very much. If you think of anything else, please feel free to let us know. And I will stop sharing and hand it back over, Amber.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate that. All right. All right, so I think now we're up to Kelly on general DAS updates.
Oh, you guys haven't heard enough from me yet today, huh? So, general DAS updates. A couple of things I think that might be of interest. One, just quickly on staffing, we are continuing to have staffing challenges, but we are making some progress in our recruitment efforts. We did have good success with our PCS3 recruitment that just closed, and we completed the interview process, and we're looking forward to having 2 or 3, can't remember if we got to the third one, but at least 2 new PCS3s joining our team, one of those at least in the IT team, very shortly. We have a recruitment underway now for 3 state procurement analyst positions. Don't know the results of that yet, but we're hoping to be getting some positions filled there at that level. And then in September, Norma Armstrong will be leading an effort to fill some OPA 4 IT procurement strategist positions. We have one person leaving us shortly for a promotion. We have 1 or 2 others who have indicated a possibility of retiring in the next 6 or 9 months out of that group. So we're looking to get those recruitments moving, and hopefully we can double folks up for a few months, especially before folks move off to retirement. So we're making progress, but we still have across the program about 6 vacant sourcing positions and then 2 sourcing staff that are on long-term medical leave. So about 15% of our capacity in sourcing is still not filled, either through vacancies or people on long-term leave. But we're making progress. So hopefully you're experiencing at least that we're communicating with you and giving you updates on your projects. And if things are getting stuck, please reach out to Darwin or myself or any member of our management team so we can make sure we're keeping you updated. So that's where we're at staffing-wise. I did want to mention that we are working on updating our service level agreement. Our most substantive revision to that document was back in 2015, so that's a little aged right now. For those of you that have been around a long time like me, you'll remember Cubs and entrepreneurial management and all of those kind of things. Well, our service level agreement goes back to those days, maybe 4 DAS directors ago now, something like that. So we're looking to streamline and clean up and modernize our service level agreement. We are doing that work internally. My hope is to bring a draft of that agreement for all of you to review in advance of our September DPO meeting. And they give you an opportunity to give us input and questions about the services we provide, the turnaround times we aspire to, some of those things that we'll address in our service level agreement. Our commitment is to have that new agreement completed and published and in operation no later than November 1st. And I'm hoping that'll give everyone clarity of what to expect from us in terms of the services we provide, and also what we're asking of all of you when you engage with us in terms of it's always a partnership when we do procurements on your behalf. So our document will speak to that. But one piece I'm going to need some help from all of you, and I just want to plant the seed today, and next month I want to collect up your ideas. We want to develop a couple, maybe 3 new performance metrics for DAS procurement services. The ones that we've had going back to 2015 in many cases are no longer relevant to how we do business. And we want to work with you to think of 2 or 3 service level commitments that we can measure, that we can report out on a dashboard or some other method to give you all a sense of how we're doing in terms of meeting what those service levels are, whether it's customer service or quality of our work, whatever it might be. So, and they need to be meaningful for all of you, but also they need to be meaningful for us so we can use the data to make internal program changes. So I just like you to kind of, if you have time between now and our next meeting, just to be kind of thinking about what would be useful. And then if you can share that with me, we'll try to develop some metrics that we can report out on and hold ourselves accountable to. So a service level agreement work that we're doing. I think we're talking later about thresholds and classifications, so I'll hold off on that. And then I already spoke about the EO, so those are probably the major things. Questions on any of that? All right. So I'm going to give it back to you, Amber, before anybody asks me a really hard question.
Okay. All right. I think I did see that we had John McCormick join us. He's going to be doing our DOJ update for today. And so he'll give us a little update and then open it up for any questions that people might have for him.
Yeah, give John all the really hard questions. Thanks.
Hi, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. So good afternoon, everyone. I looked through the list. I recognize a lot of names. I actually know some of you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm John McCormick. The reason that I'm here is I wanted to introduce myself. As probably a lot of you know, there was some reorganization in General Counsel. BTS changed its form. Our longtime attorney in charge, Mark Williams, retired at the end of December. I took the job in an interim role, and within the last couple of weeks, that became a permanent position. So that's the primary reason I'm here, is to introduce myself, to let you know there's now a permanent manager of the business transactions section in General Counsel. I put my name in the chat because I meant to put in all of my contact information, but just my name went in there. So I just stuck my email address in the chat. So I would invite you to feel free to use it if you have any questions about what BTS is doing generally with your specific project that you feel might be not getting the attention it deserves, or whatever. My email is there, and it's for your use. I don't have any particular updates to provide. I mostly asked to attend to introduce myself. I will say I know a lot of you are interested in the status of the revisions to the legal sufficiency rules. So those were in progress. That project was a little bit reprioritized because of the reorganization in BTS, but it's back on track. Internally, we have internal drafts, comments are back. So we're close to producing a draft that we are going to be using for the rulemaking and for your comments. I know one of the questions that has come up a lot. It concerns the thresholds, and to that, I will say that we've been talking to DAS about some of the changes that they're making or proposing to be made to their thresholds for small and intermediate procurements, or bumping up the 3 levels. We are looking at our own thresholds with the intent to align where it makes sense to align with the DAS thresholds. And I will say under our current drafts, that is where we are, except with respect to a handful of IT transactions, where we're looking at our risk assessment in, I guess, in some cases, we're trying to align our risk assessment with how EIS views risk in IT transactions. So that's where we are there. So that's really all I wanted to say. Yeah, but if I'm happy to take any questions y'all might have. And I'll look through the chat here. I don't see any questions. Thank you all for the congratulations. It's very nice. Oh, there's one. Is DOJ still having agencies use their contact attorney instead of BTS? So I'll explain how contract matters are assigned within General Counsel. So you should all be using the CRV mail email list for submission of requests for contract review. So if you're not, please do. And at some point here, I'll drop that email in the chat just to remind people. But so you use that email, it goes to an inbox. There are 2 staff, BTS staff, our administrative assistants monitor that daily and pretty much clear it out daily. Matters are assigned based on subject matter for the most part. So that, and it's in some cases by agency. So DAS matters, DAS procurement matters for DAS alone, acting for itself, or for statewide price agreements, things like that. Those stay in BTS. IT stays in BTS. Real estate stays in BTS, although as you all know, that's not subject to public contracting code. Other agreements are sent generally, to contact counsel. So if they don't fall into one of those subject matter areas. So, OHA grants go to the Health and Human Services section, or OHA client services contracts go to the Health and Human Services section. A lot of other grants go to the Tax and Finance section. I think I misstated there. All grants go to the Tax and Finance section. So yeah, generally they do go to your contact counsel unless they fall into one of the subject matters that I mentioned earlier. So that's the general rule. Let's see, Melissa asks, so I hope that answers the question. If not, follow up in the chat. Let's see, at some point how the DOJ used the DPO's recommendations. I can't tell you line for line what we responded to or how we responded to each of those recommendations. But the DPO recommendations from, I think it's probably almost a year ago now, were one of the inputs that went into the revisions to the rules. In terms of the thresholds, Melissa, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we're sort of trying to align with DAS on those, and I know that some of the DPO recommendations were different than where DAS is headed, as far as I understand now. So, in response to those specific DPO comments, that's where we are following DAS. Otherwise, I don't remember them well enough to understand to be able to say sort of line by line or to what extent as a whole we incorporated those, but they were considered. So let's see. That's it. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So that's what I have. Next meeting, we'll return to the normal operating procedures. Karen Johnson is typically our representative on this council, and she'll continue to be the representative on the council. That's that.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Did I go a minute over? I apologize.
You're good. You're fine. All right. Thanks so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. The next one that we want to talk about now is the Dpo Council Initiatives. And I know we've had quite a few things going on this past couple of months. And so we're wanting to kind of get back to the original idea of these, which was that we do some of this work. Some has been done in the meetings and some will be done outside the meetings, just because I think there's too much to address all inside. And one thing I wanted to ask while we are kind of all in the meeting, we've had several different reach outs of folks that want to be on the different committees, right? Because we've talked about having committees that would potentially meet outside of this group to be able to talk through these issues and develop strategy and plan around them. And so if you wouldn't mind, in the chat, and this is where we'll kind of collect this, I have my executive assistant Ada is on here as well, and she's gonna be, if you could put in the chat, we've got the 3 committees, right? So we're gonna have the Class and Comp Committee, if you're interested in being on that, the Threshold Increase Committee, the DEI and Procurement Efforts Committee, which Chris Wilson has offered to head now. So he is gonna be the head of that, sort of the chair, if you will, of that committee. And so if you could pop that in the chat, and I know that I can think of a couple of you that have offered to be on a couple different committees, just kind of put in there your name and the committee that you're willing to be on. Thank you, Catherine. Then we can kind of have that sort of captured here all in one meeting, and then they'll have these very comprehensive lists. I think I've seen them in many, many different formats. We'd have had some in certain meetings and some in emails and some on Teams. And so it would be helpful if you could just drop that in here. Perfect. Awesome. If you guys wouldn't mind doing that. And if I don't see, I might reach out to you if I don't see the names of a couple of those that I know. I've got kind of some lists already started, but you know, if it's not going to work for you, or if you change your mind and want to switch to another one, that is okay too. So if you want to just let us know and drop that in the chat, then we can get those folks will be reaching out to you to set up kind of these sub meetings to talk about where we're at, or where we want to go. So thank you for doing that. And so just in that piece, is there anything, Chris, Kelly, I'll let you actually hit thresholds first here.
Sure. Nothing to change on thresholds. We've been working with Legislative Council to finalize the draft bill, which we are taking forward to the session to make the changes I've talked about previously, which is increasing the direct award threshold to $25,000 and increasing the intermediate procurement threshold to $250,000. That's still our plan, is to carry that bill forward in the next session. And so we've done everything we can at this point to queue that up, get the draft bill approved by Legislative Council. And so now we are shopping for a member of the legislature to sponsor it, and we think we have that accomplished. So call your friends and neighbors and tell them to have their member of the legislature approve our bill. And once it's finalized and we have a bill number, we'll share that with you. So that's where we're at on thresholds.
Are you, Kelly, interested in having a committee review the language? Because I know you guys have done an initial draft, but you were like, if there were any tweaks, you had talked about potentially wanting some folks to review it. Were you still wanting that help?
We ran out of time for that. Ledge Council had a cutoff for the language, and so we ended up just having to rely on what the lawyers had let us put in there. We did open up a little sort of placeholder space, so once I'm able to share it, I'll send that draft bill out, and I'm happy to get input in terms of, you know, if we have a comment in the wrong place or something, but it's very short and succinct. It's related to procurement thresholds, is specific to the pieces I just mentioned. We try to leave a little window in there to give us some rulemaking room around disparity study results, but pretty succinct.
Okay. So do you really need a group at this point in time or not? Not especially unless somebody's just
I don't
curious.
think I'll need a group at this point. If the bill
Okay.
passed, I will want to get a group together to look at then our administrative rules, and if we want to sync up changes in the admin rules to reflect the new threshold. So we can probably put that on hold for right now, Amber.
So, okay, great. So there'll just be those other two then. So the DEI and Procurement Efforts Committee and the Class and Comp Committee. So it would be the two then we'll be needing. We would like support on, if possible. Okay, awesome. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to say about? Thank you for agreeing to head this group. We really appreciate that. It makes a ton of sense with what you're doing, I think. So pretty exciting.
Well, I'll just update a little bit about our efforts and how they're applicable to everyone and what's going on, and then some of the future asks that will be coming to the DPO Council for specific data asks for the research that we're looking at, and then some of our other efforts around procurement equity. And we've already talked about the executive order and some of those different things. But what right now, really, we're at the trail end of bringing on the vendor through the contracting process, solidifying the contract, and we all know what that process is. But we're just making sure that it's clear, it gets understood from different points of view because of this work and because of some of the public facing aspects of the work, and also that us in state government really understand what we're trying to do and what we're trying to get accomplished. Some of the next steps that will be really intensive, we'll be reaching out to many of the agencies and trying to understand what data we need. We were not clear on all the questions on the specifics of the data ask, so I'm not ready to bring that forward right now, and I'm not ready to answer all of that. I have a couple ideas and guesses, but I don't want to bring forward that. But then we will have a person on several people that will be points of contact for those data requests. But we're still working through that process. But that should be early September that we should have more of the information solidified and those asks more concrete, so that we're asking you for something very specific that seems doable. And it's not just something that seems non-practical. Some of the other things I think with the DEI efforts for this group, I think that really we can help shape some of the efforts that we're already doing, and also look at some of the possible recommendations that we'll be seeing later on, and then also part of the 5-year plan. It just, I believe that it just circles back to all of our efforts and makes sure that your input is part of how we make the recommendations out of the disparity study. Without that input, it's more like we're being told what to do instead of trying to shape it from those of you that are doing the work. So the goal of it is to make it as practical as possible, to make it make sense from the persons doing the work at the ground level, rather than DAS is telling me what to do or state government is telling me what to do. So that's really the goal, I think, with all this. I know there's some other efforts, and I know Kelly's reaching out and through some other channels trying to build consensus for the 5-year plan and a couple of our other community engagement initiatives that we need to do with this work. But at the end of the day, it's really just about equity in the process. And a lot of what we'll do with these, with the recommendations, will be what's called race neutral actions. And so what that means, it's just stuff that helps all of us make the job easier, and also make make the process easier. And so those are the things that will actually benefit, I believe, all of us. But we'll be using the disparity study as a catalyst to change law, practice, policy, whatever it needs to be. So, but those recommendations, I feel, need to come from you all, need to come from the folks doing the work. And so, and it needs to have direct empathy for everyone doing the work, our contract and procurement experts doing the work on the ground. So that's really my update, but it's really, I'm looking to you if you want to reach out to me anytime, if you want to sit down and talk, find out more information about what we're doing, explain something in what you're doing. I would love that. And I promise that any of you want to join our subgroup, I will not waste your time. I will make sure it's beneficial. I will make sure that actually the work that we turn out is something that is tangible, that we can put into place. And so that's just the way that I think and how I work. Um, and so those are my thoughts on that. But I just wanted to make sure that you know that you can contact me. I can loop you in with my team, and we can move forward with all that.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. That sounds great. I appreciate that you're when you're thinking about those elements, that data elements that are needed, that you are going to run it by kind of the folks doing the work to be able to see what's practical to pull and not, right? Because I think sometimes we get some requests, it's like, how can we even do this? And I think it would be helpful to get that feedback and sort of, so that we can kind of broaden our minds and think about, well, what if we did it this way or that way? So, we have a hand up, and let's see, we recently brought on a DEI coordinator at the Department of Forestry. Should I include her in this process so she can provide input?
Yes.
Great. All right, Catherine.
Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to raise my hand down now. Okay, Chris, we're putting together an implementation plan for the new executive order. Do you want to see that? Does this need to go through DAS before we deliver it to our director, or?
No, that's my understanding. However, I know we're working across agencies. We're really trying to implement and try to in our 5-year plan, and I can't speak directly to it because we're just at the beginning of the process, but our goal is to integrate as much agency input as possible. So it can't hurt to share it with us, and we can share what we have. But
just putting it together, we've already identified things that we need to be doing better. And so I don't know if all the agencies were kind of bringing that up to that level, if it would help with the ultimate, plan for that DAS is putting together.
Yeah, that would help. I would personally love to see what you're putting together.
Okay.
I would agree with that, Chris. Catherine, we would love to see what you folks are working on. We can kind of use all the hints we can to the right direction to formulate this and the content.
Okay. I'll send that over next week.
I appreciate
the second question I have, and maybe this was a while ago and we've all been in summer mode and vacation mode and I just lost sight of it. Did we also have an initiative for process improvement, or did that get dropped, or was that ever a thing? Is this another thing I'm thinking about?
I spoke here about one of the things that DAS was asked to do from the executive leadership team was to put together a group to look at procurement process improvement. I have not done that yet, but that is still on the list of things that we need to do. It's not necessarily per se a DPO initiative. It's a DAS Procurement Services Needs to Do initiative, but we'll be looking to the Dpo Council to help us with that. But we kind of got sidetracked now with this EO implementation. So thank you for bringing that back, Catherine, actually. And I know you've expressed interest in helping with that, so I haven't lost sight of it.
Okay. If you need help, Kelly, let me know.
I need lots of help.
Committee.
Thank you.
All right, great. Do we have any other questions or comments before we move forward and get Okay, we'll move forward. We have Adam Helvey here to talk to us about sustainable procurement program. Hi.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Turn on my camera for a moment so you remember that I'm a real person. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off just a few slides, talk a little bit about some policy efforts that we're making at DAS Procurement. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background of what we're proposing, what the policy exactly is, and why to have a sustainable procurement policy in the first place. talk about some of the key subject areas of the policy, and then a slide on why we're reaching out for feedback. So the background for this policy is that it was about 2019 when I started efforts to create a sustainable procurement program. And one of the efforts that we knew we'd wanted to work on, we didn't know what it'd look like at the time, but that we'd take a stab at looking at a policy. This is a statewide policy. And so the first thing that we did was we went through and we reviewed all statutes, OARs, and executive orders. And on the call, I also have David Wortman. He's the sustainability coordinator for all of DAS. He's on the team, and he did pretty extensive review of this himself. And we kind of put those together and looked at them and kind of saw where they're scattered. And some areas, they were a little bit vague. And so we found a policy 107.11.140, and this policy calls out, it's a DAS, I believe it was an EAM policy, but we asked if we could take it and revise it because it does call out procurement in about 3 or 4 areas. And it does talk about sustainability requirements, but the policy was quite a bit old and kind of really general. So we thought we'd go ahead and give a crack at revising it. And it's pretty substantial revision, so it's going to look completely different. But yeah, so a year and a half later, we did this work drafting it with some collaboration from both DAS, DEQ, and ODO. DEQ had a pretty heavy lift. We worked with Jonathan Riven in the materials section of DEQ. He's a subject matter expert, especially with specifications. And then we reviewed some other example policies. So we looked at a few other states, Massachusetts and Minnesota. We looked at some local, Portland metro area ones with, Malone County and the city of Portland. So we pulled from a lot of examples before really digging in. And then we conducted a best practice research, and we went to get feedback from the Sustainability Board, the ISCN network, which Dave helps lead, and then some other subject matter experts. So we did get some people from Oregon local governments and some other areas where they had policies or been a part of a policy-making process for states. So what is the policy? So the goals, some of the goals of this policy, it just helps formalize the sustainability program that we're creating and kind of getting off and running. It defines sustainability for state procurement. So, a large difficulty with sustainability is often, what do you mean by sustainability? Everybody has different definitions and different levels to which they go. So effort here is to kind of organize and kind of say this is what we mean in these areas. So it focuses on the effects of procurement on health, climate, and environment, addresses inclusiveness and diversification in supplier community. So definitely going to work with Chris Wilson on this, and I sent him a copy a couple of times, I think just recently today. Give some guidance for life cycle thinking and innovation, provide some specifications for goods and services, and it really specifies who is responsible for what and DAS and other agencies for this program effort. So why should we have a sustainable procurement policy? Well, we already have some EOs concerning carbon reduction and efficiencies in energy and water and other climate topics, and it helps agencies save resources and money. We definitely do a lot of consideration in that field to make sure that we're, looking at the long-term effects and whether or not to purchase and cost benefits. Supports agencies in the sustainable procurement decisions, avoids materials that may be harmful to humans and the environment, and it lets suppliers know what's important to the state. So a really big piece of this for me is intentionality in state government, and in order to get more sustainable options from some of the suppliers and in contracts, is letting them know that that's what we want and that we're serious about it. So that's a really big portion. Then of course supports Oregon business. So some of the key areas of this policy that you will see are environment, social, and unofficial objectives. There's guidance on certifications. There's specific product requirements. There's general sustainable procurement practices, sustainable procurement program elements, and program and policy evaluation. So the last two are portions for really just the DAS-pointed sustainable procurement program. And for feedback, I'm going to go ahead and email this, and I don't know if I'll give it to maybe Amber or Kim, one of the two, and we'll get it out to all the DPOs. We'd love to review and provide your feedback for August 31st. I know it's a little bit tight, but we are trying to move the policy forward before the end of the year. So we're looking for, are there any items in here that are not easy to understand and implement? We're going to show support with your staff. Are there any missing elements, any things that you think just aren't represented in there? So it's still in draft form, and we will be moving it forward, but we really, really appreciate your feedback. So there's my contact info for afterwards, just in case anybody doesn't have it. And then I just thought I'd open up for a few questions. I know I got a few minutes since we're ahead. Does anybody have any questions about this? And actually, it's in a template document. It's in the policy template document, so you'll see it in its close to done form. Okay, so it looks like if you forward the policy to Kim, that would be great. Okay. Man, if that's the hardest question I get back, we're doing pretty good. Right.
Really good information, Adam. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm sure you'll get feedback when folks see the draft policy. So looking forward to seeing that feedback as well. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, we can open it up to agency, well, to roundtable. So we'll do roundtable. Does anybody want to kind of mention any procurements you've got out there, anything that you'd like to share that's happening in your agency? I will say I just recently we were filling a PCS1. We had a PCS1 recruitment. Got a lot of people coming back, and actually a lot of really great applicants. I was really pleased with. I was really surprised actually at the amount of people that we had and how well they seem to do. I think there's a lot, and a lot of people from even outside the state, which was kind of nice. I love it when I see we don't have to steal from one another. So so anyway, that's ours. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? Any recruitments or anything happening in the agency, or do you just want the time back? All right. Going once. Okay, well, I think we're good to go. Maybe, yes. So if you have, again, if you're willing to be on one of the committees that we mentioned, the two committees, please let us know in the chat. That would be awesome. I think we really are looking for feedback from, different perspectives, different sizes of agencies, whatever we can get there. I think that would be super helpful. So thank you for that. And that's a wrap. I'm thinking we'll kind of add a few updates. I kind of heard, there's a couple of things we want to talk about at the next meetings potentially, to have a couple areas of focus. So we'll try to get those scheduled into the next meeting to talk about those specific items, like the local procurement process improvement thing maybe, and those couple other areas that we're looking at here. And you should be looking forward to that policy, the sustainability policy draft coming out to you from Kim here shortly. And that's about it right now. All right. Well, I'll let you go. You got some extra time. Oh, do you want to say something, Kelly?
No, just thank you, Amber. And yes, if you're taking agenda items, I'd like to come back and talk about our SLA, talk about the 5-year plan, and talk about procurement improvement. And that'll probably be enough of me for next meeting. So thanks.
I like it. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time, and we will see you next month, and some of you in between on different potentially those committees and the work group and all that fun stuff. So see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.